Welcome to Tech with Kaushik. This is part 1 of our complete practice question series for the AZ-900 Microsoft Azure Fundamentals exam. Choose your answer before the timer ends. Then review the correct answer, detailed explanation, and exam tip. Let us begin part 1. Let's take a look at question number 1. This one focuses on resource groups. Take a moment to review this scenario. Your organization is designing its Azure resource organization strategy using resource groups. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. A resource group can contain resources deployed in different Azure regions. Statement 2. A single Azure resource can exist in multiple resource groups simultaneously. Statement 3. Deleting a resource group deletes the resources contained within it. The first statement is yes. A resource group's location stores metadata. Its resources can be deployed in other Azure regions. The second statement is no. An Azure resource belongs to exactly one resource group at a time. The third statement is yes. The resource group is a lifecycle boundary, so deleting it deletes its contained resources. The main takeaway is a resource can belong to only one resource group, but a resource group can contain resources from multiple regions. Let's work through question number 2. First, let's review the situation. A company is estimating the financial impact of moving workloads to Azure. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1. Many Azure services use consumption-based pricing, so charges depend on actual usage. Now check statement 2. Consumption-based pricing requires an organization to purchase maximum capacity before deployment. Now check statement 3. The Azure pricing calculator can estimate expected Azure costs before resources are deployed. For statement 1, choose yes. Consumption-based services are billed according to measured usage and selected pricing terms. For statement 2, choose no. Buying maximum capacity in advance is associated with traditional capital expenditure, not consumption pricing. For statement 3, choose yes. The Azure pricing calculator estimates expected costs for planned Azure configurations. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Consumption pricing shifts spending toward operational expenditure and lets usage scale without buying all capacity up front. Let's focus on question number 3. The key situation is this. Your organization wants to evaluate the security posture of its Azure resources and receive prioritized recommendations for reducing security risks. Which Azure service should you use? Watch the differences between these options. Option A. Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Option B. Microsoft Entra ID. Option C. Microsoft Cost Management. Option D. Azure Service Health. Go with option A. Microsoft Defender for Cloud. This works because Microsoft Defender for Cloud assesses cloud resources against security standards and provides recommendations that help improve security posture and reduce risk. The other choices do not work because B. Microsoft Entra ID provides identity and directory services, not cloud workload posture recommendations. C. Microsoft Cost Management analyzes and optimizes spending, not security posture. D. Azure Service Health reports service issues and planned maintenance, not resource security recommendations. Exam tip. Defender for Cloud focuses on cloud security posture and workload protection, Azure Advisor provides broader optimization recommendations. Next, question number 4. Scenario. A company wants cloud workloads whose expected performance and operating costs can be forecast with greater consistency. Which cloud benefit best describes this requirement? Option A. High availability. Option B. Scalability. Option C. Predictability. Option D. Elasticity. The answer here is option C. Predictability. Let's look at the reasoning. Predictability in cloud computing helps organizations forecast performance and costs by using consistent service characteristics, monitoring, and pricing information. Now let's rule out the other options. A. High availability focuses on keeping services accessible during failures. B. Scalability is the ability to increase or decrease capacity to meet demand. D. Elasticity is automatic or rapid adjustment of resources as demand changes. A helpful shortcut is this. Predictability concerns expected performance and cost, high availability concerns uptime, scalability concerns capacity. Question number 5. Let's go. A public sector organization needs a dedicated Azure cloud environment designed for eligible United States government agencies and their partners. Which Azure environment meets this requirement? Choices. Option A. Global Azure. Option B. Azure Government. Option C. Microsoft Azure operated by 21 ViaNet. Option D. An Azure Availability Zone. In this case, choose option B. Azure Government. The main reason is Azure Government is a dedicated, physically isolated Azure environment for eligible US government organizations and their validated partners. Here's why the alternatives are not suitable. A. Global Azure is the general commercial cloud and is not restricted to eligible US government customers. C. Microsoft Azure operated by 21 ViaNet is the separate Azure environment for customers in China. D. An availability zone is an isolated data center location within a region, not a sovereign cloud environment. Here's a useful exam tip. Sovereign clouds address specific government, legal, compliance, and data residency requirements. Now for question number 6. This question takes us into Azure storage. An application needs object storage for images and videos and shared file storage that existing applications can access through the SMB protocol. Which two Azure storage services should you use? You need to identify two correct options. Here are the options. Option A. Azure Blob Storage. Option B. Azure Files. Option C. Azure Queue Storage. Option D. Azure Table Storage. Option E. Azure Managed Disks. The required selections are Option A. Azure Blob Storage and Option B. Azure Files. This is the best choice because Azure Blob Storage is designed for unstructured object data such as images and videos. Azure Files provides managed file shares that can be accessed through protocols such as SMB. The remaining options can be eliminated because C. Queue Storage stores messages for asynchronous communication, not files or media objects. D. Table Storage is a NoSQL key value store, not a file sharing service. E. Managed disks provide block storage for Azure virtual machines, not shared SMB file storage. Blob storage is object storage. Azure Files provides managed file shares. Managed disks provide VM block storage. Here comes question number 7. Consider this situation. An organization wants to require multi-factor authentication when a user signs in from an untested location or from a device that does not meet compliance requirements. Which Microsoft Entra feature should the organization use? Choice A. Microsoft Entra Conditional Access. Choice B. Azure Role-Based Access Control, RBAC. Choice C. Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Choice D. Azure Policy. The right response is option A. Microsoft Entra Conditional Access. Conditional access combines signals such as user, device, application, and location to make access decisions and enforce controls such as multi-factor authentication. B. Azure RBAC controls authorization to Azure resources after identity is established. C. Defender for Cloud evaluates cloud security posture and protects workloads. D. Azure Policy evaluates resource configurations for governance and compliance. The main takeaway is conditional access is the zero trust policy engine for sign-in decisions. RBAC determines what an authenticated identity can do. Next up is question number 8. Here's the scenario. A development team wants a managed database platform. The cloud provider will manage the physical infrastructure, operating system, and database engine, while the team manages its data and application logic. Which cloud service type best fits this requirement? The choices are: Choice A. Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS. Choice B. Platform as a Service, PaaS. Choice C. Software as a Service, SaaS. Choice D. Private Cloud. The best choice is option B. Platform as a Service, PaaS. Here's why. PaaS provides a managed platform in which the provider operates the infrastructure, operating system, and platform software while the customer focuses on applications and data. Let's quickly check the incorrect choices. A. With IaaS, the customer manages the guest operating system and installed software. C. SaaS delivers a complete application for users rather than a platform for building applications. D. Private cloud is a deployment model, not a cloud service type. Keep this point in mind for the exam. IaaS provides managed infrastructure, PaaS provides a managed application platform, and SaaS provides a complete application. Let's continue with question number 9. The focus now shifts to Azure Advisor. Let's start with the scenario. An administrator is reviewing the purpose of Azure Advisor. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement says, Azure Advisor analyzes resource configuration and usage telemetry to provide personalized recommendations. The second statement says, Azure Advisor can recommend opportunities to reduce costs and improve reliability, performance, and security. The third statement says, Azure Advisor is the service used to deploy resources from Azure Resource Manager templates. Statement 1 should be marked yes. Advisor analyzes configuration and usage information to identify optimization opportunities. Statement 2 should be marked yes. Advisor recommendations cover areas such as cost, reliability, performance, security, and operational excellence. Statement 3 should be marked no. Azure Resource Manager deploys templates, Advisor provides recommendations rather than deployments. Exam tip. Azure Advisor recommends improvements, Azure Resource Manager deploys and manages resources. See how you handle question number 10. Before choosing, identify the key constraint. Your organization has physical servers in an on-premises data center and virtual machines in another public cloud. You want to apply Azure governance and monitoring to those external resources from Azure. Which Azure service provides this capability? Use the details in the question to eliminate options. Next, option A, Azure Kubernetes Service, AKS. Next, option B, Azure Express Route. Next, option C, Azure Arc. Next, option D, Azure Migrate. In this case, choose option C, Azure Arc. This works because Azure Arc extends Azure management, governance, and security capabilities to servers and other resources located outside Azure. The other choices do not work because A, AKS is a managed Kubernetes service for running containerized workloads in Azure. B, ExpressRoute provides private network connectivity, but not a unified external resource management plane. D, Azure Migrate discovers, assesses, and migrates workloads to Azure rather than managing them in place. A helpful shortcut is this. Azure Arc manages and governs resources outside Azure. Azure Migrate helps move workloads into Azure. Here's an important one. Question number 11. We are moving on to VM scale sets. This situation sets up the main requirement. An application experiences unpredictable changes in demand, and the team is evaluating Azure virtual machine scale sets. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement says, Azure virtual machine scale sets can create and manage a group of load-balanced virtual machines. The second statement says, autoscale rules can add or remove virtual machine instances as demand changes. The third statement says, virtual machine scale sets are designed only for manually managing one virtual machine at a time. The answer here is yes. Scale sets are designed to create and manage groups of load-balanced VM instances. The answer here is yes. Autoscale can increase or decrease instance count according to metrics or schedules. The answer here is no. A scale set manages a group of virtual machines and supports centralized scaling and lifecycle operations. Here's a useful exam tip. Use virtual machine scale sets when an application needs a group of virtual machines that can scale with demand. Question number 12. Needs a little extra thought. Look for the most important clue in this scenario. A company is evaluating Azure Virtual Desktop for remote access to corporate desktops and applications. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. Azure Virtual Desktop users can connect only from Windows devices. Statement 2. Azure Virtual Desktop can publish full desktops and individual applications. Statement 3. Azure Virtual Desktop supports Windows 11 Enterprise Multisession. Statement 1 should be marked no. Users can connect through supported clients on multiple platforms and through supported web access. Statement 2 should be marked yes. Administrators can publish a complete desktop or individual applications through Remote App. Statement 3 should be marked yes. Windows 11 Enterprise Multisession allows multiple concurrent user sessions on one session host. Azure Virtual Desktop can deliver full desktops or remote app applications and supports Windows Enterprise Multisession. Question number 13. Next, let's move into storage tiers. Here's what is happening. Compliance logs are stored in the archive tier of Azure Blob Storage. An auditor now needs to read one of the archived blobs. What must occur before the blob can be read? Review the options. Option A. The blob must be rehydrated to an online tier such as hot, cool, or cold. Option B. The blob can be read directly from archive by using Azure Storage Explorer. Option C. The storage account must be converted to a premium account. Option D. The storage account redundancy option must be changed. Go with option A. The blob must be rehydrated to an online tier such as hot, cool, or cold. Let's look at the reasoning. The archive tier is offline. A blob must be rehydrated to an online hot, cool, or cold tier before its contents can be read. Now let's rule out the other options. B. Storage Explorer cannot bypass the offline state of an archived blob. C. Changing the performance tier does not make an archived blob immediately readable. D. Changing redundancy is unrelated to reading an archived blob and may itself require archived blobs to be rehydrated. The main takeaway is archive has the lowest storage cost and the longest retrieval delay. Rehydrate archived blobs to an online tier before reading them. Now let's examine question number 14. Here's the situation to consider. A company is moving Windows Server workloads to Azure virtual machines and has eligible existing Windows Server licenses that it wants to reuse to reduce licensing costs. Which Azure benefit should the company use? Here are the possible answers. Option A is Azure Hybrid Benefit. Option B is Azure Reservations. Option C is Azure Pricing Calculator. Option D is Budgets in Microsoft Cost Management. The answer here is option A, Azure Hybrid Benefit. The main reason is Azure Hybrid Benefit lets organizations apply eligible existing Windows Server or SQL Server licenses to Azure workloads and reduce applicable licensing costs. Here's why the alternatives are not suitable. B. Reservations reduce compute costs through a usage commitment. They do not reuse existing licenses. C. The pricing calculator estimates expected costs but does not apply license benefits. D. Budgets track spending and trigger alerts but do not reduce license charges. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Azure Hybrid Benefit reuses eligible licenses. Reservations reduce cost through a term commitment. Budgets monitor spending. Take a careful look at question number 15. We are moving on to public-private endpoints. Pay close attention to what the scenario really requires. An application in an Azure virtual network must access an Azure storage account through a private IP address without sending traffic over the public internet. Which networking feature should you use? Compare each option with the requirement. Consider option A. A private endpoint. Consider option B. A public endpoint. Consider option C. Virtual network peering. Consider option D. Azure Express Route. The best choice is option A. A private endpoint. This is the best choice because a private endpoint assigns a private IP address from a virtual network to an Azure service, allowing private access over the Microsoft backbone network. The remaining options can be eliminated because B. A public endpoint exposes the service through a publicly reachable endpoint. C. VNet peering connects virtual networks but does not create a private endpoint for a platform service. D. ExpressRoute connects on-premises networks to Microsoft Cloud services and is not the endpoint itself. Exam tip. A private endpoint brings an Azure service into a virtual network through a private IP address. Question number 16. Consider this situation. An organization wants to discover, catalog, classify, and govern data across its data estate. Which Microsoft service should it use? The choices are: Option A, Microsoft Purview. Option B, Azure Advisor. Option C, Azure Monitor. Option D, Azure Policy. The right response is option A, Microsoft Purview. Microsoft Purview provides unified data governance capabilities that help organizations discover, understand, classify, and govern data across their data estate. B. Azure Advisor recommends improvements for Azure resources. C. Azure Monitor collects and analyzes monitoring telemetry. D. Azure Policy evaluates Azure resource configurations for compliance. A helpful shortcut is this: Microsoft Purview governs data, Azure Policy governs Azure resource configurations. Take a careful look at question number 17. Look for the most important clue in this scenario. A team needs to host a web application and REST API in Azure without managing the underlying operating system. Which Azure application hosting option is the best fit? See which choices you can rule out. Next, option A, Azure App Service. Next, option B, Azure Virtual Machines. Next, option C, Azure Virtual Desktop. Next, option D, Azure Data Box. Go with option A, Azure App Service. Here's why. Azure App Service is a managed platform for hosting web applications and APIs. Microsoft manages the underlying infrastructure and operating system. Let's quickly check the incorrect choices. B. Azure Virtual Machines require the customer to manage the guest operating system and installed software. C. Azure Virtual Desktop delivers virtual desktops and applications to end users. D. Azure Data Box is an offline data transfer service. Here's a useful exam tip. Use App Service for managed web app hosting. Use virtual machines when operating system control is required. Question number 18. This question takes us into IaaS PaaS SaaS. Scenario. A company is comparing SQL Server on an Azure virtual machine with a managed database platform such as Azure SQL Database. Which operational benefit is associated with the PaaS option? Options. Option A. The provider manages platform patching and built-in availability. Option B. The customer has complete control of the host operating system. Option C. The customer attaches physical drives directly to the database service. Option D. The customer installs arbitrary software on the managed host operating system. In this case, choose option A. The provider manages platform patching and built-in availability. This works because in PaaS, the provider manages the underlying infrastructure, operating system, and platform maintenance, reducing the customer's administrative responsibility. The other choices do not work because B. Complete guest operating system control is associated with IaaS, not PaaS. C. PaaS abstracts the physical infrastructure and does not expose physical drives. D. Customers do not control or install software on the managed host operating system. PaaS reduces infrastructure management. IaaS provides more operating system control and responsibility. Next up is question number 19. An organization is selecting Azure security and access management tools for several foundational requirements. Match each requirement to the appropriate Microsoft service or feature. First, review these entries. Item 1 on the left is assess cloud security posture and receive recommendations for improving resource security. Item 2 on the left is require multi-factor authentication based on signing conditions such as location or device state. Item 3 on the left is grant a user reader access to a specific Azure resource group. The right column contains right option A, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Right option B, Microsoft Entra Conditional Access. Right option C, Azure Role-Based Access Control, RBAC. Here are the correct matches. Pair assess cloud security posture and receive recommendations for improving resource security and A, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Pair require multi-factor authentication based on sign-in conditions such as location or device state and B, Microsoft Entra Conditional Access. Pair grant a user reader access to a specific Azure resource group and C, Azure Role-Based Access Control, RBAC. Let's look at the reasoning. Defender for Cloud assesses security posture, conditional access enforces sign-in controls from identity signals, and Azure RBAC assigns permissions at Azure resource scopes. The main takeaway is Defender for Cloud improves resource security posture, conditional access controls sign-ins, RBAC controls authorization to Azure resources. Let's continue with question number 20. Here's the situation to consider. A company wants a workload to use a separate logical network boundary from other Azure workloads. Which Azure resource provides this foundational network isolation? Take a look at each choice. Choice A, a dedicated Azure virtual network. Choice B, a dedicated resource group. Choice C, a resource lock. Choice D, a resource tag. The best choice is option A, a dedicated Azure virtual network. The main reason is an Azure virtual network is the foundational private network boundary in Azure. Separate virtual networks are isolated unless they are intentionally connected. Now let's rule out the other options. B, a resource group is a management container, not a network boundary. C, a resource lock prevents deletion or modification, but does not isolate network traffic. D, a tag adds metadata for organization and cost reporting but provides no network isolation. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Virtual networks provide network isolation, resource groups organize resources, locks protect resources from changes. Let's take a look at question number 21. Treat this as an easy question. Take a moment to review this scenario. A company is planning to deploy virtual machines and storage in Azure and wants to estimate the expected monthly cost before deployment. Which tool should the company use? Let's compare the available options. Choice A, Azure Pricing Calculator. Choice B, Microsoft Cost Management. Choice C, Azure Advisor. Choice D, Azure Service Health. The answer here is option A, Azure Pricing Calculator. This is the best choice because the Azure Pricing Calculator estimates the expected cost of planned Azure services based on selected configurations, regions, and usage assumptions. Here's why the alternatives are not suitable. B, Cost Management analyzes, monitors, and optimizes costs for cloud usage and billing data. C, Azure Advisor provides optimization recommendations for deployed resources. D. Azure Service Health reports service issues, planned maintenance, and health advisories. Exam tip. Use the pricing calculator before deployment. Use cost management to analyze and control actual cloud spending. Now let's examine question number 22. First, let's review the situation. A customer-facing web application needs application performance monitoring, browser page load telemetry, and exception tracking. Which Azure Monitor feature should you use? Now let's review the options. Option A is Application Insights. Option B is Azure Service Health. Option C is Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Option D is Azure Advisor. The right response is option A, Application Insights. Azure Monitor Application Insights provides application performance monitoring for live applications, including request performance, dependencies, user telemetry, and failures. The remaining options can be eliminated because B, Azure Service Health reports Azure Service incidents and planned maintenance. C, Defender for Cloud focuses on security posture and workload protection. D, Azure Advisor provides optimization recommendations rather than application telemetry. A helpful shortcut is this. Application Insights monitors application behavior and performance. Log Analytics queries collected log data. Let's work through question number 23. Let's start with the scenario. An operations team wants one feature for querying collected log data and another for monitoring the performance of live applications. Which two Azure Monitor features meet these requirements? Select two answers that satisfy the requirement. Now let's review the options. Option A is Log Analytics. Option B is Application Insights. Option C is Azure Service Health. Option D is Azure Advisor. Option E is Microsoft Purview. The correct answers are Option A, Log Analytics, and Option B, Application Insights. Here's why. Log Analytics is used to query and analyze log data in Azure Monitor. Application Insights provides application performance monitoring for live applications. C. Azure Service Health reports platform incidents and maintenance that may affect Azure services. D. Azure Advisor provides best practice optimization recommendations. E. Microsoft Purview provides data governance capabilities. Here's a useful exam tip. Log Analytics is for log queries. Application Insights is for application performance monitoring. Alerts act on monitoring conditions. Question number 24 brings in a useful concept. This is marked as an easy question. Let's focus on the following scenario. An Azure service must be reachable through an internet routable address from clients outside the organization's private networks. Which type of endpoint provides this access? Focus on what separates these choices. Now examine choice A. A public endpoint. Now examine choice B. A private endpoint. Now examine choice C. Virtual network peering. Now examine choice D. Azure VPN gateway. The answer here is option A. A public endpoint. This works because a public endpoint exposes a service through an address that can be reached over the public internet, subject to the service's authentication and network controls. Let's quickly check the incorrect choices. B. A private endpoint assigns a private IP address in a virtual network and avoids public internet exposure. C. VNet peering connects to virtual networks and is not a service endpoint type. D. VPN gateway provides encrypted connectivity between networks over the public internet. It is not a public service endpoint. Public endpoints are internet reachable. Private endpoints use private IP addresses inside virtual networks. Question number 25. Needs a little extra thought. Before choosing, identify the key constraint. A new Azure administrator is learning the purposes of common management and monitoring tools. Match each task to the appropriate Azure tool. Here are the items on the left. Left side, choice 1, manage Azure resources through a browser-based graphical interface. Left side, choice 2, review personalized recommendations for improving deployed Azure resources. Left side, choice 3, receive information about service issues and planned maintenance that may affect your resources. Here are the possible matches. Right side, choice A, Azure Portal. Right side, choice B, Azure Advisor. Right side, choice C, Azure Service Health. The matches work out like this. Match manage Azure resources through a browser-based graphical interface with A, Azure Portal. Match review personalized recommendations for improving deployed Azure resources with B, Azure Advisor. Match receive information about service issues and planned maintenance that may affect your resources with C, Azure Service Health. Let's look at the reasoning. The Azure Portal is the browser-based management interface. Azure Advisor provides personalized optimization recommendations, and Azure Service Health reports relevant service issues and maintenance. The main takeaway is Portal manages resources, Advisor recommends improvements, and Service Health communicates platform events affecting you. Now for question number 26. Next, let's move into Azure Cost Management. Here's the scenario. A company wants an email notification when spending for an Azure subscription reaches a defined threshold during the billing period. Which feature should it configure? Review the options. Choice A. A budget in Microsoft Cost Management. Choice B. An Azure Monitor Metric Alert. Choice C. An Azure Advisor Recommendation. Choice D. A Microsoft Defender for Cloud Alert. Go with option A. A budget in Microsoft Cost Management. The main reason is cost management budgets define spending thresholds and can notify recipients when actual or forecast costs reach configured percentages of the budget. The other choices do not work because B, Azure Monitor Metric Alerts react to monitoring metrics or logs, not accumulated billing thresholds. C, Azure Advisor recommends optimizations but does not serve as the subscription spending threshold. D, Defender for Cloud Alerts concern security threats and posture, not financial spending. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Budgets monitor spending thresholds and send alerts. They do not automatically impose a hard spending limit. Let's take a look at question number 27. First, let's review the situation. An organization is using Azure policy to enforce governance and assess compliance. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1. An Azure policy assignment can evaluate existing resources for compliance with organizational rules. Now check statement 2. Assigning an Azure policy automatically deletes every existing non-compliant resource. Now check statement 3. Azure policy can be assigned at management group, subscription, and resource group scopes. The first statement is yes. Policy compliance evaluation includes existing resources within the assignment scope. The second statement is no. Non-compliant resources can be reported or remediated according to supported effects. Universal automatic deletion is not the default behavior. The third statement is yes. Assignments can be scoped through the Azure resource hierarchy, including management groups, subscriptions, and resource groups. Exam tip. Azure policy enforces and assesses resource standards. Azure RBAC controls who can perform actions. Let's continue with question number 28. Here's the situation to consider. An organization is choosing Azure Blob Storage Access tiers to balance storage cost, access cost, and retrieval time. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. The hot tier has higher storage costs but lower access costs than the cool tier. Statement 2. The archive tier provides immediate read access without rehydration. Statement 3. A general-purpose V2 storage account can specify a default hot, cool, or cold tier for new blobs that do not explicitly set a tier. For statement 1, choose yes. Hot storage costs more per unit but has lower access charges than cooler online tiers. For statement 2, choose no. Archived blobs are offline and must be rehydrated before they can be read. For statement 3, choose yes. The account default can be hot, cool, or cold for eligible blobs that inherit the tier. A helpful shortcut is this. Colder tiers reduce storage cost but increase access cost and, for archive, retrieval delay. Here comes question number 29. The focus now shifts to Azure migration. Here's what is happening. An organization wants to discover and assess on-premises servers for Azure readiness, right-size target resources, estimate costs, and plan migration to Azure. Which Azure service should it use? Here are the options. Option A, Azure Migrate. Option B, Azure Arc. Option C, Azure Data Box. Option D, Azure Express Route. In this case, choose option A, Azure Migrate. This is the best choice because Azure Migrate provides a central hub for discovering, assessing, and migrating on-premises servers, applications, and data to Azure. Now let's rule out the other options. B. Azure Arc manages and governs resources that remain outside Azure. C. Azure Data Box transfers large datasets using a physical appliance but does not perform full workload discovery and assessment. D. ExpressRoute provides private network connectivity to Microsoft Cloud services. Here's a useful exam tip. Azure Migrate helps assess and move workloads to Azure. Azure Arc manages resources wherever they remain. Here comes question number 30. Here's what is happening. An IT team is reviewing tools for moving and managing files in Azure storage. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Now check statement 1. Ascopy is a graphical application used exclusively to manage Azure SQL databases. Now check statement 2. Azure Storage Explorer provides a desktop interface for browsing and managing Azure storage data. Now check statement 3. Azure File Sync can synchronize on-premises Windows Server file shares with Azure files. The answer here is no. Ascopy is a command-line utility for copying data to and from Azure storage. The answer here is yes. Storage Explorer provides a graphical interface for storage services such as blobs, files, queues, and tables? The answer here is yes. Azure File Sync centralizes file shares in Azure Files while supporting local Windows Server caches. ASCII is command line, Storage Explorer is graphical, and Azure File Sync supports hybrid file shares. Next, question number 31. Next, let's move into Azure Data Box. A data center has very limited network bandwidth and must transfer 100 terabits of data to Azure in a one-time migration. Which Azure migration option is the best fit? Options. Option A, Azure Data Box. Option B, Azure Express Route. Option C, ASCII over the existing internet connection. Option D, Azure File Sync. The best choice is option A, Azure Data Box. Azure Data Box uses a Microsoft-provided physical storage appliance to transfer large amounts of data when network transfer would be too slow or impractical. Here's why the alternatives are not suitable. B. ExpressRoute is private connectivity and may suit ongoing hybrid connectivity, but it is not the simplest offline transfer option for this one-time limited bandwidth scenario. C. The existing connection is explicitly too limited for a practical online transfer. D. Azure File Sync supports ongoing hybrid file synchronization rather than a large offline one-time migration. The main takeaway is use Azure Data Box for large offline transfers. Use online tools when network capacity is sufficient. Question number 32. Here's the scenario. A hybrid infrastructure team is reviewing the purpose of Azure Arc. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. The first statement says, Azure Arc can extend Azure governance to supported physical servers outside Azure. The second statement says, Azure Arc can connect and govern supported Kubernetes clusters hosted outside Azure. The third statement says, Azure Arc is required to manage virtual machines that already run natively in Azure. The first statement is yes. Arc-enabled servers bring supported non-Azure servers into the Azure management plane. The second statement is yes. Arc-enabled Kubernetes connects supported clusters from on-premises or other clouds to Azure management. The third statement is no. Native Azure virtual machines are already Azure resources and do not require Azure Arc for standard management. Keep this point in mind for the exam. Azure Arc extends Azure management outside Azure. It does not replace Azure Resource Manager for native resources. Next up is question number 33. Consider this situation. A critical application must remain accessible even when a localized hardware or software component fails. Which cloud benefit best describes this requirement? Choice A, high availability. Choice B, scalability. Choice C, predictability. Choice D, serverless computing. The right response is option A, high availability. Here's why. High availability uses redundancy and resilient design to keep a service accessible despite failures and to maximize uptime. The remaining options can be eliminated because B, scalability adjusts capacity to meet demand. C, predictability concerns expected performance and cost. D, serverless is a compute approach in which the provider manages infrastructure and scaling details. Exam tip. High availability focuses on uptime during failures. Scalability focuses on changing capacity. Let's work through question number 34. Take a moment to review this scenario. Administrators use the Azure portal, Azure CLI, and Azure PowerShell to create and manage Azure resources. Which service provides the consistent management layer used by these tools? Let's compare the available options. Choice A, Azure Resource Manager. Choice B, Azure Monitor. Choice C, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. Choice D, Microsoft Purview. The answer here is option A, Azure Resource Manager. This works because Azure Resource Manager is Azure's deployment and management service. Management tools send requests through this common control plane to create, update, organize, and delete resources. B. Azure Monitor collects and analyzes monitoring telemetry. C. Defender for Cloud assesses security posture and protects workloads. D. Microsoft Purview provides data governance, security, and compliance capabilities. A helpful shortcut is this. The portal, CLI, PowerShell, SDKs, and templates use Azure Resource Manager as the management layer. Now let's examine question number 35. We are moving on to cloud benefits. Let's start with the scenario. A business analyst is comparing foundational benefits of cloud services. Match each description to the correct cloud benefit. The left column contains left item 1, increase or decrease resource capacity to meet changing demand. Left item 2, keep an application accessible when a component fails. Left item 3, provision and manage cloud resources through tools and automation. Choose from these right side options. Choice A on the right is scalability. Choice B on the right is high availability. Choice C on the right is manageability. Let's review the completed pairs. The correct match for increase or decrease resource capacity to meet changing demand is A. Scalability. The correct match for keep an application accessible when a component fails is B. High availability. The correct match for provision and manage cloud resources through tools and automation is C. Manageability. Let's look at the reasoning. Scalability changes capacity, high availability maintains service during failures, and manageability describes the ability to provision and administer cloud resources efficiently through management tools and automation. Here's a useful exam tip. Scalability changes capacity, availability protects uptime, and manageability simplifies administration. Let's continue with question number 36. Here's the situation to consider. A security team is applying the defense in-depth model to Azure workloads. Match each security mechanism to the corresponding defense in-depth layer. Let's begin with the left side. Left item 1, apply operating system security patches to virtual machines. Left item 2, require multi-factor authentication for users. Left item 3, use controlled physical access at data center entrances. Now look at the choices on the right. Right option A, compute. Right option B, identity and access. Right option C, physical security. Use these pairings. Apply operating system security patches to virtual machines goes with A, compute. Require multi-factor authentication for users goes with B, identity and access. Use controlled physical access at data center entrances goes with C, physical security. The main reason is operating system protections belong to the compute layer, authentication controls belong to identity and access, and data center access controls belong to physical security. Defense in-depth uses multiple security layers so that failure of one control does not expose the entire system. Now for question number 37. A team needs repeatable, consistent deployments of the same Azure infrastructure by using a declarative infrastructure as code approach. Which technology should the team use? Here are the options. Choice A, Azure Resource Manager, ARM, templates. Choice B, Azure Policy. Choice C, Microsoft Purview. Choice D, Microsoft Entra Connect. The right response is option A, Azure Resource Manager, ARM, templates. This is the best choice because ARM templates are declarative, JSON files that define Azure resources and enable repeatable, consistent infrastructure deployments. Let's quickly check the incorrect choices. B. Azure Policy evaluates and enforces resource standards, but is not the primary deployment template technology. C. Microsoft Purview provides data governance capabilities. D. Microsoft Entra Connect synchronizes identity information between on-premises directories and Microsoft Entra ID. The main takeaway is infrastructure as code defines desired infrastructure in files, ARM templates and Bicep are Azure native declarative options. Let's work through question number 38. This question takes us into ExpressRoute. Let's start with the scenario. An enterprise is evaluating Azure ExpressRoute for hybrid connectivity. For each statement, select yes if the statement is true. Otherwise, select no. Statement 1. Azure ExpressRoute provides private connectivity to Microsoft Cloud services that does not travel over the public internet. Statement 2. An ExpressRoute circuit includes redundant connections to Microsoft at a peering location. Statement 3. ExpressRoute is the same as Azure VPN gateway because both rely on an IPsec tunnel over the public internet. For statement 1, choose yes. ExpressRoute extends an on-premises network to Microsoft Cloud services through a private connection. For statement 2, choose yes. A circuit is provisioned with redundant primary and secondary connections at the peering location. For statement 3, choose no. VPN gateway commonly uses IPsec over the public internet. ExpressRoute does not use that same connectivity model. Keep this point in mind for the exam. ExpressRoute is private provider-based connectivity. VPN gateway uses encrypted tunnels over the public internet. Now for question number 39. An administrator opens Azure Cloud Shell and wants to manage Azure resources by using a command line environment. Which two command line tools are available for Azure management? Choose the best two responses. The choices are option A, Azure CLI. Option B, Azure PowerShell. Option C, Azure Portal. Option D, Azure Advisor. Option E, Microsoft Purview. You should choose option A, Azure CLI and option B, Azure PowerShell. Azure CLI and Azure PowerShell are command line tools for managing Azure resources and are available through Azure Cloud Shell. The other choices do not work because C. The Azure Portal is a browser-based graphical management interface. D. Azure Advisor provides optimization recommendations. E. Microsoft Purview provides data governance, security, and compliance capabilities. Exam tip. Cloud Shell offers Bash with Azure CLI and PowerShell with Azure PowerShell in a browser-based shell environment. Let's take a look at question number 40. The focus now shifts to resource tags. First, let's review the situation. Several departments share one Azure subscription. The organization wants to categorize resources by department and analyze costs using that metadata. Which Azure feature should be applied to the resources? Here are the possible answers. Choice A, tags. Choice B, resource locks. Choice C, Azure policy. Choice D, management groups. Go with option A, tags. Here's why. Tags are name-value metadata pairs that categorize Azure resources and support filtering, reporting, and cost allocation by values such as department or project. Now let's rule out the other options. B. Resource locks protect resources from deletion or modification. C. Azure policy evaluates and enforces organizational standards. It can require tags, but the tags themselves provide the metadata. D. Management groups organize subscriptions rather than categorize individual resources within a subscription. A helpful shortcut is this. Tags add metadata for organization and cost reporting. They do not create security or authorization boundaries. You have completed part 1 of the AZ-900 practice question series. Continue your preparation by opening the complete playlist and watching the remaining parts in sequence. Please like this video, subscribe to Tech with Kaushik, and enable notifications for more cloud certification exam preparation content. Share your score, questions, or feedback in the comments. Thank you for watching. See you in the next part.